Hello and welcome to the Minds on the Frontline Podcast, brought to you by the Wayne State University Frontline Strong Together program. The Minds on the Frontline Podcast is designed to inform, educate, and entertain first responders, their families, and the general public regarding the realities of frontline work-related mental health challenges. In this episode, we will introduce you to Lyf Johnson and Pam Dooley. Lyf is a 911 dispatcher with Dearborn Police and Fire, and Pam is a dispatcher for the Oakland County Sherriff Department. Lyf and Pam are well aware of the work-related challenges faced by their fellow first responders. Unfortunately, it is common for frontline workers to not get the care that they need to prevent or alleviate stress, PTSD, anxiety, depression, and/or other mental and behavioral health challenges. During this episode, we will have an open and honest dialogue about the various barriers that prevent first responders from getting the help that they need. Specifically in this episode, we will focus on stigma, avoidance, repercussions, as well as the cost and availability of care. And now our hosts, Jeff Lassers and Mike Mattern.
Good morning, Mike. How are you, buddy?
Good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there.
All right, good.
Episode 2. We made it through the first one. We got it out there.
They brought us back. We're back. Even after the first one, we're back. So
yeah, they're letting us do a second one.
That's
so that's all obviously like a big win for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the biggest difference between, I think, that first episode was really, we had to get out there of what Frontline Strong is. Frontline Strong is a program that offers behavioral and crisis services to our Frontline 5, which is going to be our professional full-time and volunteer police, fire, EMS, corrections, and dispatchers.
Active and retired.
Active and retired. Very good. Thank you very much. And in that first episode, we really had to give an overview of the program. That program is really designed for our Michigan first responders, but this podcast, Minds on the Front Line, is really designed for the world, right? So it's an extension of the program. So as we go into episode 2 and kind of get away from Frontline Strong as our topics, I think it's important to tell our audience today that episode 2 and beyond is going to bring on first responders directly, having honest conversations about some very real things. We're also going to leverage the plethora of subject matter experts that Wayne State brings to the table with their programs. Obviously, we're the first responders who kind of speak first responder and can translate a lot of the things that academia, psychology, psychiatry, mental wellness, all those things we can help translate to our friends in the first responder community, as well as advising these subject matter experts on how do you approach these subjects with these people. Because at the end of the day, if you want to connect with us, you have to connect with us. It can't just be theoretical. It can't just be, I think it's going to happen. No, it's going to be incremental growth and integration with that type of network. And we think that this podcast is just another way for each group to kind of branch out, reach out to each other, sit down, talk, and then share those conversations to open up more conversations and connect. What do you think?
Absolutely. Nice part moving forward here is, like you talked about, that the number one thing is it's first responders talking to first responders.
Yeah.
We're going to have those real conversations in the real way that we would normally have those conversations. In this episode, we brought on Lyf Johnson and Pam Dooley, 2 seasoned dispatchers in the area, large amount of call volume, so they get dosed pretty well with calls and traumas and things like that. And where we really went with it was this is the first episode of many now that we're really going to have those conversations with the first responders, the dispatchers, and really have those conversations how we have those conversations. Whereas before, we were talking to mental health professionals, but we speak each other's language, and it's really going to show that no matter if you're sitting in the dispatch chair taking calls, you're sitting at the firehouse ready to respond to a run, you're in your patrol car, you're in your ambulance, you're in the corrections, wherever it may be, you'll notice that we have these conversations, and they're all the same conversations, but we do different jobs. But we all speak the same language. And that's what's going to be really one of the biggest things that you're going to see with this episode and moving forward, especially with this episode where we start talking about mental health, the barriers that each of us experience. You think just because we have different jobs, it's different barriers, but really it's all the same. You got things like stigma, avoidance, repercussions that can come from having a mental health problem going on. And really one of the biggest ones is cost and the availability to care.
Absolutely. And I think in this episode, we really help identify what are the barriers still stopping people from getting care in 2023 as you'll hear in this episode, we talk about what the world used to be. You know, Lyf's got 20 years experience. I got about 18 to 20 years experience in the multiple departments I've worked for. Mike's right up there too, and Pam's been on the job for a minute. So these are people with a lot of experience that can give us that insight into that world. And the other thing that I think this episode also helps, we're not saying dispatchers, hey, come join us at the table. We are reminding them that they've always had a place at the table.
Absolutely.
And I think some dispatchers don't always feel like they're on that frontline 5 as a first responder. But I think after you hear this episode, you're going to be like, okay, I now have a much bigger appreciation. Like I said, I've been doing this for a long time. And I learned a lot sitting down with Lyf and Pam and going, okay, now I get not only why you're a first responder, but how you're assuming all this stress, answering call to call, 911 to 911. And then I get there and I'm allowed to actually complete the call. I get some closure, whether it's a happy ending or a sad ending, but they only get the introduction or prelude to the story, which can not be fun.
And then it gets cut off right then and there.
Yeah.
That's all they know.
Yeah. Powerful episode. Enjoy the show. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, you know. So let's start off. Lyf, who are you? What do you do and where do you do it?
Well, I'm Lyf. I'm a 911 dispatcher. I've been with Dearborn for just over 20 years now, and we dispatch for 6 cities: Dearborn, Melvindale, Wayne, Westland, Garden City, and Inkster.
Do you guys run like the waste management communications too or something? That's a lot.
Pretty much. We're the only phones in the city open 24 hours, so everything kind of gets schlepped on us.
How many calls does that add up to a year?
Oh, good grief.
Yeesh.
I think we answer about 300,000.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
And so as a dispatcher, you're doing primary 911, fire, EMS, and anything else needed?
Correct. Non-emergency, emergency, and as well as
Hey, get off my
dispatching.
lawn all the way up to a murder.
Correct.
Copy.
Yep.
All right,
All right.
Pam, how about you? Pretty similar situation?
Hi, yeah. My name is Pam Dooley. I work for Oakland County Sheriff's Office in the 911 dispatch. I've been there 5.5 years. And yeah, we cover 23 cities and townships.
Yeah.
All right, okay, go. Name them all.
Waste management.
Alphabetical.
I
Yes, in
cannot-
alphabetical order.
I can tell you where it is on the map, but I can't name them all off the top of my head. But last year, 2022, we did 516,000 calls for service.
How many
Wow.
people are answering the phone at any given time there?
On days and noons, we have 6-7 call takers.
Wow, that doesn't seem like enough.
Right. But then we have 5 police dispatchers and 4 fire. 19 staff members on days and noons, and then 13 on mids.
Wow.
Yeah.
So still understaffed for quite a large operation going on.
Yes.
And I've been
Oh,
on
yeah.
the campus there, and I'm a resident of Oakland County, so I realize how busy it can get. We're firefighter paramedics. We go on the road all the time. We're always on these calls, and how they impact us and how the emergencies impact you guys is different. So let's touch on that first. Lyf, give us your perspective on the fact that dispatchers obviously have frontline stress like we do, but how you accumulate it is different. You know, I go to a bad situation, whereas you're receiving bad calls. Talk to me about how that really builds up in a stressful situation and impacting your behavioral and mental wellness over time.
Well, we answer call to call. You guys, you'll handle your run from start to finish, and then you get, downtime writing reports. You go back to the station. Whereas dispatch, once they're done with the initial reporting phone call, we're on to the next one. We don't get downtime. It's call after call after call, and you don't get closure most of the time, because you're too busy. We can't, get in touch with fire or police to get closure on a run. Like, hey, what ended up happening with that subject? And
Yeah, it's like you don't get to hear the end of the story.
Right.
And that sucks. Like even when the TV show cuts out early, like, well, what happened?
right, yeah, you get like the intro and, maybe 5 minutes into the plot, and that's
Right.
it.
Imagine
That's
the
all you
cable
get.
going out 2 minutes before the show's over, and then apply that to real life and life and death.
That's pretty much
That sounds way
dispatch
worse.
on loop.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're like highlighting those things that I've been learning recently is like you only get to hear the complaints during the peak of when they chose to call 911.
Right. We get the raw footage. We get the raw scene. It's before, any emergency personnel actually get on scene and control it. We get the rawness, the in progress crisis.
That's a lot.
And it's a lot, especially to try and control it from a phone.
Yeah, that's the difference too, is when I show up on scene, at least somebody feels like somebody's there to help and they kind of calm down just seeing a giant fire truck,
Right.
paramedics, equipment, and 4 people hop out like, what can I do for you today? Whereas you're like, ma'am, sir, ma'am,
Right.
let's hold on. Stop
Constantly.
yelling. Yeah, and it's
Constantly trying to get their
And the
attention,
stress of-
rightfully so, because they're dealing with a crisis.
right.
And, you have to keep their attention on a phone while their emergency is going on. And it's
Good luck.
right. It's a challenge.
So Pam, how about you? How does that affect you in the same but differently?
Well, to build on that, we have to try and calm them down. So it does build up anxiety just naturally when you're dealing with a screamer or, somebody that's really in distress. But when we disconnect, like she said, we go to the next call. We don't even have time to follow up on that one. We may never find the end result, and then we're just kind of left there hanging. It does bother you. We advise some of our coworkers, if you need to get up, go for a walk, take some time to go out in the hallway. If you need to go home, people have a really, really bad call and they feel like they can't function anymore properly, then they'll go home. But we offer resources too through our peer support program.
Well, that's very progressive because not every work environment, especially for dispatchers, is so comforting. And let's face it, a lot of them don't have the capacity to let you go. Like somebody's got to answer the phone. At some places, there's only 2 people in the room.
That's very true, yes.
Yeah, so luckily, you're staffed enough and big enough to do that, and I commend you for it. That's great. Yeah. So let's talk about the peer support team that you're on there. And we think traditionally, Mike's a peer support guy at his fire department. They do a fantastic job. And it seems so obvious to me now in 2023, you got peer support teams, fire, EMS, police. So how does dispatch kind of resolve that? Because when I have a crisis, it's pretty obvious, hey, we had an infant death or we had a bad fire or something that occurred that was not good. And it's obvious the mechanics of that. Is it similar in that fashion for you guys?
Yes, we have 3 representatives in dispatch. The staff knows who they can contact if they need someone to speak to. However, if they don't come to us, we usually go to them and we say, you want to talk about it? We're always here for you. If they choose to talk to us, then we listen to them and then move from that point and offer them resources that we have.
That's a really streamlined process. How long did that take to get standardized and culturally competent, aware people? Because you can have that plan. You can create a protocol that says when this, do that. But until you have the trust of all the people in that organization, you're not going to ask for help.
Right. And there are a lot of them that don't want to speak to a coworker because they just don't feel comfortable. They want to go
anonymous.
Right. Yeah. And they want to go outside. They don't know who they can trust. Right.
Right.
So it's still work in progress. It's a fairly new program, but we have a lot of representatives in each area of the Sheriff's Department.
So, Mike, you're a peer support team leader, and like the Oakland County Sheriff dispatchers, they share a peer support team with all the professionals on the campus, essentially. So the road sheriffs, the corrections officers at the jail, dispatchers, and pretty much anybody within that organization, whereas you have a similar system within the city of Dearborn, and you include your dispatchers.
Yeah, so the fire department has their own peer support team. The police department has their own peer support team. And between the 2 peer support teams, we also have dispatchers who are on the peer support teams for the police side. But anytime there's a bad run and we have teams go out and talk to the fire department or the police department, we also always send a team up to talk to the dispatchers at that time. So we make sure that the dispatchers are taken care of because, we realize they're getting it just as much as we're getting it. You're getting dosed with the trauma that we're getting dosed with. So we're going to treat them the same way we would treat any of our people who are there on scene taking care of things. They experienced it just as much. So that's why it's important to have those peer support teams or the CISM teams or whoever go out and talk to the dispatchers because they had the same trauma. It was different modality of trauma, whereas we saw it in front of our face. They just had to listen to it and they had their own picture of what was going on. We actually got to see, feel, touch, smell, but they had just as much trauma as we did.
Absolutely. And now you guys are really talking about 2 different organizations that have a streamlined process for anybody that wants the help. We'll get it. You'll support them, all of it. And even under those circumstances, I'm sure you're experiencing barriers, right? In 2023, the stigma is still there. People are still avoiding their problems. The feeling of somebody will do something if I let them know I'm having a problem. And there's a cost to care here. So I kind of want to break some of these down and kind of get each of your individual perspectives on it. So Mike, kick us off. Why and how in this day and age is stigma still a thing? Because when I started in the fire and EMS service, it really was a thing. I'm old. I've been doing this for like 20 years now, so I feel like those even Vietnam vets were on my crew, and they were not cuddly teddy bears. They were wonderful human beings, but it isn't the same of how are you doing? Like somebody checks in with me once in a while just because I work where I work. It's great. So like, why is there still a stigma there?
There's a couple reasons. One, I've been there 17 years. I came up under the same, you need to toughen up. If you can't deal with this, find a new job. So you've got that kind of sitting out there from generations before you, if you've been doing this long enough. But I think it's also the jobs that we have, whether it be police, fire, dispatch, EMS, corrections. There's a certain level of, I have to be able to deal with these things. I'm the one people call when they need help. So if I have a problem, then I'm weak or I'm whatever it may be. You can't allow yourself to have that vulnerability of, well, he couldn't handle that call or she couldn't handle that call. So the stigma is almost placed on yourself because you go, that shouldn't have bothered me. I'm a firefighter. I'm a dispatcher. I'm a police officer. You almost put it a little bit on yourself, but it's also the environment that you live in. You don't want your coworkers to think you can't handle that job or you can't handle that next phone call or you can't handle that next run. So it's when the people collectively within that realm, whatever you work in, go, hey, it's all right to not be okay. That's when that stigma goes away. If that's not verbalized, then it's always there.
Yeah, I totally agree that this ego is projecting it onto us to make us feel bad that we have it, and it stops us, and the stigma's self-projected.
I absolutely agree. When I was hired in 2002, and same thing, Mike, similar time, part of your training is go through the call, swallow it, go to the next one. It's not something, take time, evaluate your emotions. No, that was never encouraged.
Right.
Like your phones are ringing. Let's go.
Right.
Let's, handle the next emergency. And part of being a dispatcher is being dissociative. So, you push your feelings way aside and you let your training take over. Well, you do that enough throughout the day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, it just becomes a habit and you're like, well, I don't need my feelings.
Right, the default mode network. We've literally rewired
irrelevant
to
at this point.
Do this and stay in stress mode.
Right, pretty much. Yeah. You're there, you're 100% focused, and your feelings, we'll deal with them later. And it's just not healthy in any way.
Okay, so we all agree that the stigma can be self-induced.
Very much so.
And whether it's self-induced or projected for somebody else, it still doesn't feel good. Pam, do you think it's still there in a little bit? We have a lot of alphas in these industries, right? And that's not a male or female thing. We have alphas, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people can push each other away or push help even when they really want it, as we're humans. We all react in a way that we don't understand, which is why we're teaming up with culturally competent clinicians so we can understand this better. In your opinion, is stigma still pushed on you, do you think, culturally?
If it's not on me, it's on my coworkers. I've heard some people say, well, it's our job. That's what we do. You need to get over it. To put an analogy out there, if you were to get the flu and I got the flu, your body's going to react different than I am. So if I get a call, the same stress call my partner gets, I may react different to it than she does because either she doesn't have the experience or I don't have the experience or I don't know how to deal with it.
Maybe your immune system's low that day because you've had a lot of calls.
Right.
And that's the point.
That's exactly right.
Dose and duration.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
what if there's nothing else we've learned since the last 3 years is the dose and duration of how things can affect us.
That's exactly it. Yes.
Interesting. All right, let's move on to avoidance. It's easy to ignore things. That thing in my back. It's a mole. I'm going here, but when it's our brain, it's even easier because the outward signs is like personality level. Mike, why do you think avoidance is so strong? And I don't think this is a first responder thing. This is a human thing.
Oh, by far. I mean, let's face it. At the end of the day, we're all human and we're acting like we're human. It doesn't matter what job you have. But I think the avoidance part is we don't want to admit that there's something wrong with us. And it's not that there's something wrong with you. It's that you've gone through something and you don't necessarily want to feel vulnerable about it.
Yeah, I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, there's been times where, I've gone on bad runs and at work, you're like, oh, yeah, everything's good. Everything's fine. I'm cool, whatever. But you get off the next morning and you're different than what you normally are different getting off in the morning. So you just kind of put it in the back of your head like, I'll be fine. I'll be all right, type deal. And you avoid dealing with whatever just occurred at work that night before. And you think if you avoid it, it's just going to go away. But in all reality, the more you avoid it, the bigger it's going to become. We all make the worst patients in the world. We tell everybody else to go to the doctor or call 911 or whatever.
Oh, I tell them to stop calling.
But when
just kidding.
When it comes to us, we're the worst ones for it. And the same goes for this stuff. We avoid it because we don't want to deal with it. We don't want to admit that it bothered us. But the avoidance part is really, I think, the part that really kind of potentiates everything and makes everything worse is we don't hit it head on. And that's where a lot of this peer support stuff comes in, where you can go in there and walk into a crew of people and go, man, that run was pretty messed up. That run kind of bothered me. You're not avoiding it. You're bringing it up. And then other people are seeing like, oh, wow, he's talking about it. It bothered him. Yeah, you know what? That was a pretty messed up call. So the avoidance part is still there because we never want to admit we have an issue going on. But I think the more we do this, the more we talk about it, that's going to start kind of going away.
So, Lyf, would you agree that avoiding things is sometimes just easier?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, with avoidance, there's no outward cues. There's nothing obvious that's wrong. You know, it's all mental.
It's not the presence of something, it's the absence of something.
Right. I mean, you break a bone, that's obvious. Go and get it fixed, but the avoidance, it's all mental. You can hide it, you can swallow it, you can go read a book, dive into, whatever activity, you want
whatever,
to.
just go, you could focus all of your focus, like kids are easy. Right. Oh, I'm so busy with the kids. Like I can blame everything in my life on my kids. So
it's a
easy.
Great distraction. And, to just keep yourself busy. And it's not helping anything. Building and building and building. And, eventually, yes, you're going to crack. It's just a matter of when.
The second you stop whatever you're doing, that thought is popping right back in your head.
Right in your head.
And that's one of the things.
Front and center.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
That's why, the music gets louder and the house cleaning gets more involved. And
or the alcohol gets poured heavier.
Yeah, their coping skills are not
because
the
your coping skills
healthiest
are like,
choices.
what's helping me avoid this? I go play hockey all the time. Well, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
But I drink all the time. Not so good.
Not so great.
No.
Don't recommend.
But I think also with the avoidance, you avoid things that make you remember that call too, or that instance.
Yeah, some triggers from other scenes.
Like
other
you might
calls,
you might know
personal.
something bad happened in that house, and you'll go around the block, so you don't have to go past that house. So it's not just avoidance in that aspect; it's avoidance in what made you. What brings those thoughts back too?
Basically, anything that won't let me address this is not good, and I need to figure it out.
Yes.
Right.
Copy that.
A lot of flight.
Yeah.
A lot of flight.
Yes.
Pam, have you ever seen this avoidance manifest in the people around you?
Yeah. They avoid it and then they take it out on something else, or they call into work. They won't show up, or they'll say that they're sick and they'll do something else, but really they're not addressing the issue. They're just using excuses, like you said.
Right.
So yeah, it happens all the time.
And would you agree that part isn't that they're quote unquote abusing sick time, is that they're not addressing it as the problem? You're only going to run out of sick time, and then what?
Right.
And now you don't have sick time when you're actually sick, and you're not addressing this
You
problem.
avoid it until you can't.
So there's
It
a
will catch
little
up
bit
with
of
you.
responsibility, but at the same, I get it. Okay. And then the other thing is like people avoid it sometimes because they feel like something bad's going to happen. Like, their boss might do something about it. Not everybody has a really supportive boss when it comes to these types of things. And I think it's getting more and more relevant that everybody's boss is getting on the same page with it. Mike, what type of repercussions could exist in somebody's mind? Like, what are the common things people say, like, but they'll do this? And there's always a they, right?
One of the biggest one is your coworkers. The coworkers are going to think something different about you. Obviously, your bosses, when it comes to promotion, it might be used against you later down the road. I think that's the biggest thing is just how it's going to affect them at work, whether it be with coworkers or with bosses. That's the biggest thing is they think something's going to come of this. Like people aren't going to trust you anymore, or they're always going to keep an eye on you while you're at work going on a run and things like that. Like, he had a problem with that. We should probably keep an eye on him. Well, it just might be an isolated incident, but now you're worried that, okay, is everybody kind of looking at me like, hey, we have to carry him through this run or things like that. So I think the repercussions are pretty broad when it comes to work, but I think it also comes from your social circles. Well, at work, is that group over there talking about you because they know that you had a problem with it or things like that. So
do you guys think that the feeling of whoever they are, doing something in response to me admitting I need help is more self-induced and projected than anything else in most circumstances? Or do you guys think that it's a real thing?
I agree with that because our staff is pretty supportive. I believe that it is just me being insecure or me not being sure of myself because now I feel terrible about this call, or I worry too much about my coworkers, what they're thinking about me or what command is thinking about me. I don't want them to view me as weak or possibly not give me a trainee or something because I'm not strong enough.
You don't want to slow down your professional progress either. And I think that's a big one. Well, if I do this, I'm up for promotion in a year. Are they going to see this as I still need to grow a little bit? And that's why I think the more danger is these little things I quote unquote will miss out on. And that adds up and adds up. And I think that's kind of what you're commenting on.
Yes, definitely it's me versus everybody else.
Right. How about you, Lyf? What do you think about that?
No, I absolutely agree. You don't want to be in the spotlight for, the wrong reasons. Like Pam said, you don't want trainees to be taken away from you because they find you as weak because you can't handle certain calls or, you just had a bad run. You want to be a strong leader and always have your full attention to detail put forth.
I think it actually makes you a stronger leader when you go through something like that. Then you can pass on to the newer
Absolutely.
people
Oh,
like,
yeah.
hey, listen, I had a run like this and this is how it affected me. Don't worry. It happened to me. And I think it really actually strengthens you as a leader. At the time, you're like, man, I feel weak. There's no, you know what I mean? And when you look back on it, it's like, I'm bringing this experience now to a new person that I can now do this for them. Like, I never got this, but now I know how
Right.
that feeling felt.
Here's this support.
Yes, here's
Yes.
the support that I may not have gotten early on in my career, which brought me to where I am today. Whereas
Right.
now it's, okay, that was messed up, how I felt.
But that also helps because you're talking about it.
Exactly.
Right. So
Yeah.
with like
Keep the
that
conversation
CISM training
going.
that we go to, that you talk about it, how you felt.
Yes.
You're kind of reliving it in
Yes.
a way. So yeah.
Yes.
I think you're also helping yourself as well.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're-
100%.
If you're talking about it again, you're easing your conscience of, whatever
Yes.
you feel,
Just talk about it.
just talk.
Well, there you go. We're getting it out. We're talking to the newer person we may be training, and we make it okay for them early on in their career. And I think that's something that's been missing for many years is that
Definitely.
culture shift,
Definitely. And I've noticed it more, 20-year career, it has changed
Exactly.
dramatically. right?
dramatically.
It's a different world from where I was in 2002 when I
Yes.
first got hired.
Yes. We found doing peer support and stuff like that, the retirees have heard about the CISM, the peer support stuff, and we're getting more calls from retirees.
Yes.
They were the ones who built the culture of keep your mouth shut, move on.
Right.
And
That's
now,
very true.
and now you're getting a phone call from the same people like, hey, we heard what you're doing over there. It sounds pretty good. How do we?
And that's great because they've got decades of suppressed,
Yes.
feelings
Yes.
and emotions and, thoughts and
Yes. I don't know.
stress.
Many times they go, oh, it's really good what you're doing for the younger people, And then next thing you know, there was this run in, 1979 on this street. And you're like, oh, okay. And then 20 minutes later, 3 other runs have now come up.
Because they never got
have
to
you been
talk about
holding
it
on to
before.
that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It sits with you.
It does.
I mean, anyone in this career, 5 minutes to 25 years,
Absolutely.
you've got calls that just sit with you.
Yes.
And I remember them like they were yesterday, and they could have been my first phone call.
Absolutely. And that's the interesting part about the retirees. How long have they been sitting with those
Right.
things? It even goes back to the avoidance part of it.
Mm-hmm.
They avoided it for so many years, kept busy with work.
Shoved it in that mental box,
Yes.
and it's been there collecting dust.
Yes, but now you're retired and all you have time to think about
Just
it.
Think.
Guess where they're all coming out now?
But it's nice that they reach out.
Yes, that's the good part. It's becoming accepted
great.
enough to where the retirees can now come in and feel okay to talk about it when they were the generation who put that wall up.
Perpetuated it.
Yes.
I don't think
They
they
did.
created it so
They
much
didn't
as
create it,
maintained
but they
the wall.
furthered it.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
They hid
Kept it
behind
going.
it, and I understand doing that when everybody else around you is telling you to do it.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we have support. Like I
Because-
wouldn't have had a mic 20 years ago and be like, no, dude, that's good. So it's fine. Wouldn't have had that. Would have been
But-
some other guy yelling at me.
Yeah, there's that dreaded phrase, it's always been done that way.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
and
boy.
my God, that was the first at least 15 years of my career. Dispatch in our department didn't really get involved in peer support the last handful of years, like just pre-pandemic. That's unfortunate.
And I think we can look at the numbers of suicides in first responder communities and go, the old way isn't working anymore. We need to find a
the
new
old
way
way's
to
atrocious.
we need to find a new way to do this because we're losing too many people here.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the good part. What do you guys think? I would say the last 5 years is when it
Mhm.
really
It's
turned on
really
its
taken
head.
a about
Yeah,
turn.
ours really took off after Oxford.
It's too bad that we
Yeah.
need events like that
Oh.
to set off a need
Very.
to trigger to help thousands of people.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. One of the things that prohibits our employers and cities and municipalities, anything you want to, is the cost of care. So until they had a really big reason, they didn't pull the trigger on doing those things and really supporting this stuff. In addition, I think one of the biggest and I think the last barrier for anybody to get help, even if they don't see stigma, they're not avoiding it, and they don't fear repercussions, money's still a thing. Time is still a thing. I might not have the time to go because I have a bunch of kids or sick family or stuff like that. So let's talk about that cost and availability of care.
So doing the peer support thing for a little while, we help a lot of individuals get into different care modalities, whether it be getting inpatient, we're getting to therapists, psychologists, whatever it may be. The problem with it is the cost. And the cost part of it goes with if your employer doesn't have health care for their employees, they're paying out of pocket. Now, you can't find somebody who does this stuff under $100 an hour. I mean, that's like a minimum. And when we talk about all these other things, it kind of plays into everything is you may have been calling off of work, like Pam was talking about. So you're not necessarily getting the money coming in that you normally be coming in. Then we put on top of it, how am I going to spend $100 a week now to go talk to somebody? That's just if you're going one time a week. So now I have financial stress on top of everything. So now I'm in a crisis. I've got bad stuff happening. Now I can't pay for it. A lot of the times, that's one of the biggest barriers is they can't pay for it. They can't take groceries off the table so they can go to see a psychologist or a mental health professional. So they make the decision to put food on the table rather than take care of themselves. And then they start going down that bad path because they're not talking to anybody. And the insurance companies need to really take a look at this stuff and go, this is just as important as if I break my leg. I break my leg, I can't work. And like Lyf, you were talking about, it's an injury you can't see. If I walked into work with a broken leg, they'd be like, what are you doing here? But if I walk into work with depression, anxiety, PTSD, nobody can see that. And they're like, you can work, right? Why are you taking so much time off? But if I got a broken leg, no one's asking me why I'm taking so much time off. Well, I can't pay for it. So I'm here. I have to come to work. That's one of the biggest issues is the cost. That stops a lot of people because there's no good way around it. If your insurance doesn't cover it, it's out of pocket. Some of the things that we're trying to work on, at least with the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union Behavioral Health Committee, is we're trying to get PTSD presumption, just like cancer presumption in the state. We know, just sitting here in this room, we know it changes us. Whether you do it for 5 minutes or 50 years, you don't walk out the door the same person you walked in. We all know, Jeff, like for us, cancer is very prevalent in the fire service because of the chemicals that we deal with, the smoke, everything else. So they signed the cancer presumption bill to pay for it. We need this for mental health as well because that's just as deadly as whatever we're dealing with.
And think about how long it took the government to understand that these immediately dangerous to life and health atmospheres, literally everywhere we go, impacts us every second we're there. And It took us this long to get them to realize we need to be protected. So although we've traversed that problem on a bigger aspect, I think this is going to have its own set of issues, and we need to keep our feet on the accelerator because the cost is going to be the biggest barrier.
Got to talk with your employers about the healthcare systems that you have. Let's make sure mental health is included in it. Nobody should have to make a decision whether they put food on the table or they go get their mental health taken care of. There should be no reason in this day and age that we have to make that decision. And unfortunately, that decision is made quite often. Who am I going to see and how much is it going to cost are usually the first two questions when we go to try to get somebody in to see somebody. Those are the first two.
I don't know if you noticed or not, but we're going through an inflation and first responders don't make a lot of money.
Right.
Yes.
And, and that's including dispatchers. We're all in that same boat of not yielding a huge income. So it's not like I have disposable income to put towards my mental care. If I had more money to do that, I'd have less stress because I'm going on vacation.
Right. Right. Yeah. You'd be doing other things with that extra money.
Right. There's a part of your life you can, money doesn't buy happiness, but it buys opportunities. Mm-hmm. And opportunities, if utilized correctly, like anything else you do with your time, what you do with it could be like, work's not so bad. Yeah, I had time to debrief, and that's kind of the balance of life, right, in that cost.
I think debriefing is key. Yeah.
So Pam and Lyf, there's really a fifth barrier when it comes to dispatchers. Some dispatchers may not feel like they're a part of the first responder community, and I think that's unfortunate. So can you guys touch on that barrier and kind of give some advice to our first responders out there listening to really make sure they include their dispatchers?
Well, I think that's a great point, and it's true. We don't. Nationwide, dispatchers as a whole are not considered first responders. We are considered admin, secretarial. We are not under the first responder branch. And that just further perpetuates the feeling that we have that we're not part of the team. We're kind of outside the team. You're an outsider, but you are in.
You're kind of like that bridge. Like you don't feel like you're all the way in. So like, I guess they get these services and you may not feel automatically included in that. And that's unfortunate.
And 9 times out of 10, we're not.
Fire, EMS, police, and the people on the road. We even forget about not only the fact that you're our dispatchers and first responders that we're talking to, but then there's these other people in the jail that are corrections officers that are dealing with something similar. So it's like we're all on the same crew. We have different positions. And then certainly there's a line. Like at some point in the office, somebody's not a frontline person. I'm sorry, but dispatchers are absolutely a part of the front
100%.
line.
Right.
100%. And
I'm not knocking, secretarial or admin positions, obviously, but we're not that.
Right.
Just because our job involves a telephone and a keyboard, we're
Right.
not.
So we certainly support and need them, and we love them as
Yeah.
a part of our system, but they're not physically or audibly in contact with the emergency going on.
Right.
Right.
Well, what they need to understand is without us taking the call or telling you where to go, you're not going to go anywhere.
You're just
And not only
flying
that
blind.
is-
you won't have a call.
Interpreting it,
Right.
calming the emotions,
Right.
getting the right information, dealing with the attitude you're getting because they're in crisis and you can't read their mind, and you're not on the way yet, and you're asking a phone number and address, and why can't you just know that from myself? All
Right.
that
Just
stuff.
get here.
And you got that 2 minutes of hell, and then, or it can be, I suppose, and then you got to tell us, you're like, dispatchers. Give me how they
Right.
pronounce that name of that street.
Yeah.
Like we even double
Oh,
down
yeah.
on you guys.
I always say,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's how you're supposed to pronounce it, but here's my shot at it.
Oh, we
Right.
can tell when you guys are like,
Phonetics.
Hylesdale? Like you guys
A
a question
question?
mark?
But
Anyway.
yeah, like you said,
Yeah.
we calm the caller, but then when you guys get on scene, they re-freak, but then they're nice to you too because they physically see you.
Yeah.
Us, we're just
just a voice.
there
You
on
could
the-
be AI. You
We're
guys
not
could be
humans.
Chat GPT or whatever
That's
it is.
true. We
Absolutely.
could be AI.
They don't know.
So as we're talking
We won't
here,
tell them.
we have you guys here. We're talking to first responders. That's what this podcast is for. What are some things that first responders can do for dispatchers in their communities to make them feel more welcome into the first responder community and make them feel like you guys are a part of the first responder community because you are?
I mean, I know you guys are busy after a scene and you're writing reports and stuff, but maybe reach out, follow up with us and say, hey, that call that you just sent us, just want to reassure you alive and breathing, or, you know, what the outcome is. Like, that's so reassuring to us. Even if it's the other way, we want to know.
Yeah.
You know, so
Even
something
the
like
end
that.
of the story, even if it's a sad story, the conclusion of it is cathartic, I think, for all of us to understand and finish it in our mind. Because we all know people die.
Mhm.
It's just a fact of life. But we also know that humans react a certain way. And if you complete the story and go through basically a briefing with me, I'm going to leave
Right,
to
gives
let it
us
go.
Closure.
Yeah.
And we can actually move on.
So would you agree that's the biggest piece of advice you can give first responders that don't receive phone calls? Give your dispatchers closure and
Give
reach
us
out to them?
closure, include
Absolutely.
us, you know, with your debriefing. I mean, Mike, the fire department's great about that. You know, we really have no complaints the last few years about that. But again, it wasn't always the case, and some departments might not be as fortunate.
Right.
They
It's like,
might.
you know, when we deliver a baby and the fire department takes over, they end up calling us back and telling us boy or girl. And we're
Aw.
yay.
Love that.
And they give us a blue or a pink pin
Oh,
as our reward. So it's nice.
That's cool.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
I keep career stats for myself on that. 3
Yeah.
boys, 3 girls over the
Oh,
phone
wow.
so far.
Congratulations.
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm just going to go out on a limb here, maybe dropping off coffee and donuts.
I will
Oh.
never say no.
The way to our hearts is to our stomach.
All right. That's
We're
yeah.
women,
So you are a
you know.
first responder then, right?
Yeah,
We
yeah,
like food.
Yeah.
We like food. Who doesn't like food?
Yeah.
Okay.
And caffeine.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Definitely.
We all live off of caffeine.
Right.
And I think sometimes we also just need to get to know our dispatchers. You
Yes.
know, over 20 years where I was at, we had like one was like a foundation. He was there forever. Kevin, shout out to Kevin. But, you know, since then, we've had a lot of younger people come in. I don't really know them that much. I know their voices. I'm like, oh, that's the afternoon Bob or whatever, you know, but I don't know them.
Right.
I remember I met Kevin a bunch, but I never met all the other people. So I think
Right, definitely.
it's really important
a lot
to
of face-to-face
humanize these
contact.
voices, even
the
if it's
face,
5
yeah.
minutes. Like, hey, I'm the guy on Rescue 2 always, oh, yeah, we always laugh at how you say that thing. I'm like, good, because that's what I'm trying to do.
Right.
So that's
Right.
one thing I've been
Nice.
doing is just trying to make my dispatchers laugh and see if they actually, I got them to do play the meow game the other day.
Meow, what are you talking about?
Rescue 2 clear, meow.
All right, Meow. Yeah, but I think it's just getting to know the dispatchers, you
Right.
know, maybe a hi in the morning when you're
Reminding them that
Right,
they're in the
something
family.
pleasant. We're human,
Yeah.
you know.
Totally.
Pick up radio. Good morning,
Totally.
radio.
Right.
Don't call us today.
I always, I
Bye.
mean, Mike knows my tone alerts in the morning are very chipper.
Very chipper. Very chipper at 8 a.m.
Yeah, if you're coming off duty, I don't like that.
The night guys are already gone by then.
I hope you have a good day today. It's like, don't tell me what kind of day I'm going to have. I'm just joking.
Well, thank you guys very much for joining us. We really appreciate
Thank you.
you.
Thank
It's
you.
a
Thank you guys
pleasure,
for
and
coming.
Thank you for thinking of dispatch.
Yes,
Really
thank
means
you.
a
Oh,
lot.
absolutely.
Yeah, they do.
Goes far.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you. I hope we proved to everybody listening that this was a powerful episode with 2 great guests. Mike, any closing thoughts?
I think one of the biggest things after speaking to Lyf, Pam, you, me, the biggest thing that you really got to realize is in 2023, we are starting and we now have all the resources that we've wanted that were lacking over the years. For many years, there was no resources out there. There was a little bit of resources. Now in 2023, we have a plethora of resources that are really focused on first responders. In the end, what's really stopping us from getting help is us.
Mm.
It's that stigma not only put on yourself, but that whatever culture you may be in that's putting on you, and you want to avoid it because you don't want to deal with it. And if you've been in the field for a long time, then that was pressed upon you and really burned into you early on into your career. But when you really look at it, there's so many resources that you can reach out to. You've got the Frontline Strong phone number. You've got the website. We've got culturally competent clinicians. We have peer support teams that were never there before. The resources that are available for people now are head and shoulders, even what they were 5 years ago. And what you really have to realize is right now, the one thing that's stopping you is you. That's where we really need to work on that stigma. We need to work on the avoidance. We need to work on all that stuff because we can't blame that on anyone but us. We can't blame the stigma in whatever service you're on. We put that into that culture. So we have to go change it and make it okay to talk about. Make it okay to go, hey man, I went to therapy last week, and talk about your therapy sessions around the kitchen table. I've seen it happen. Once those start going on, that's when people are like, oh, wow, this guy went, or, oh, wow, she went to therapy. Oh, that's not a big deal. Or, yeah, I went and talked to one of the peer support team, and the peer support team really helped. That's where we really need to do a better job as a culture in the first responder community, is changing that. When we change that, everything else will fall into place.
Well said, sir.
Thank you. Don't make me do it again.
Now go home and get some sleep.
I don't think I blacked out there for a second. What happened?
I don't know. We'll find out. I recorded it.
Thank you for listening to the Minds on the Frontline podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We have more great content coming out soon. Remember, if you are experiencing any crisis, work-related, substance abuse, depression, relationships, financial, or any other, reach out by calling 1-833-34-STRONG or go to fst5.org for more information. Thank you for listening to the Minds on the Frontline podcast. Have a great day.